What is going on in New York? Well, if you haven't heard, New York, they passed rent controls. They passed a 1 year and a 2 year rent freeze. Just happened, and that's one of the pledges that the mayor made when he was running, saying he was going to do that. Now, how did he do that? Well, he pretty much stacked the control board with people who he knew would pass this for him. But what is the big impact? How does that work with rent controls? Well, I can tell you from a landlord perspective because I own some rental properties. What does that do? Well, if I have to freeze my rent and other expenses go up, that puts landlords in a really tough position because welcome to the Real Estate Show with Pat Lopez, where we talk everything real estate. For this show, we're going to talk about rent controls. What is going on in New York? Well, if you haven't heard, New York, they passed rent controls. Well, there's always been, sort of rent controls, but they passed a 1 year and a 2 year rent freeze. Just happened, and that's one of the pledges that the mayor made when he was running, saying he was going to do that. Now, how did he do that? Well, he pretty much stacked the rent control board with people who he knew would pass this for him. But what is the big impact? How does that work with rent controls? Well, I can tell you from a landlord perspective because I own some rental properties. What does that do? Well, if I have to freeze my rent and other expenses go up, that puts landlords in a really tough position because if real estate taxes go up, homeowners insurance goes up, electrical bills go up, water bills go up, and I can't raise my rent, then that really puts a stress on landlords. And what ends up happening? Well, what ends up happening is when something breaks, I don't have the money to fix it, or I'm not, super excited or motivated to do improvements to the property because I just don't have it. Also, what ends up happening is the value of the property goes down because if I can't bring in X amount of rent, then it's not worth as much because the next buyer is going to want to see that. So that is a big issue. Now, where are the positives? Well, hey, if I'm renting a home and I know for the next 2 years my rent cannot go up, well, that's a win for the renter. But the problem that you have is the only real way to control rent prices is supply. There's something called supply and demand, and we can never get away from that. Are you thinking about buying, refinancing, or investing in real estate? I've been a loan officer for 30 years, helping my clients find the right loan for the right property. I keep it simple and honest. If you want real numbers and guidance you can trust, give me a call. Now let's get back to the show. So let's say we turn around and we build 1 million new apartments. Well, guess what? That's going to put pressure on all the other apartments because there's a bunch of supply out there. And guess what? People are going to jockey to get that. And I'll give you a perfect example. I'm in Philadelphia, and in Philadelphia, they built something like 20, 30,000 new apartment units altogether. All these buildings went up. And what are these apartment buildings doing? They're offering 2 months, 3 months free rent just to fill the apartments. And we're talking about vacancies where there are 7, 10% vacancies, where a building owner wants to be closer to 95, 98% occupancy, not vacancy part of it. So that controls the price because if a landlord is offering 2 months, 3 months free rent, well, that's lowering how much money I have to pay. So what is this going to or what could happen in New York? We don't know. Nobody has a crystal ball entirely, and it is a freeze for the next 2 years. But that could cause developers not to turn around and want to develop more apartment buildings because if everything's dollars and cents. How much, if it costs me this much money to build, how much money am I going to get in rent? If it doesn't pencil out, I'm not doing it. Just like anybody wouldn't do it. The builders, investors, they're not a charity. They're out there to make money. Period. Okay. Now, there is a balancing act because, hey, we have to look on the renter side. renters have to live somewhere. Affordability is an issue. Everything costs money, from gasoline to food costs, you name it, utility costs. Everything costs money. So there is a strain as far as it. But the answer isn't these rent controls, because we've seen it, throughout time, where when you have these rent controls in there, and you can't raise rent, the first thing that happens is the property starts becoming dilapidated because the owner doesn't have the money to fix it, or it doesn't pencil out, and they're saying, hey, I'm not dumping money into the unit and fixing it. And then what do you have? You have people living in squalor, and then you have less development, because if I can't make money, there's less development. Listen, the bottom line here is, the only way you can reduce rents is supply. That's the only way. The more buildings that go up, the more apartments, the more availability that's out there, the lower the rents are going to be, because now you have these apartment buildings competing against each other, just like we have where people are offering 2 months, 3 months free rent just to get these buildings occupied, and then that's putting stress on all the landlords of having to reduce numbers. The rent controls, listen, Venezuela's done this where it was disastrous. You limit the supply, and remember, supply and demand. If there's less supply out there, because now builders aren't building new apartment buildings or transferring old office buildings into new buildings, into new rental apartment buildings, and you have 10 people fighting over one apartment, which eventually is just raising the price, or the landlord just doesn't have the money to maintain the property and keep it in the condition it should be. Super interesting. We're going to see how it transpires in New York City. And we're talking about a big number, about 25% of all the apartments, or I'm sorry, 40% of all the apartments out there, about 1 million apartments, are under this rent control. So it's a pretty big sample, a size of what's out there. Interesting to follow. Tell me what your thoughts are. Do you think rent controls are good? Do you think they're bad? Hey, only time will tell. History sort of sides on rent controls not being good, but we will see. Also, this is going to air right before the 4th of July, so happy 250th birthday of America. Happy 4th of July. And be sure to follow this show. We talk everything real estate. Follow the show on Facebook, Instagram, and of course on YouTube, The Real Estate Show with Pat Lopez on YouTube. Tell me your thoughts. Tell me, give me some likes. That really helps out the algorithm. A really short a pod, but hey, I just saw the approval of the rent controls up in New York. And as a landlord, full disclosure, having properties, that could cause a strain for me. Just to give you an example, right now, for me personally, this is without mortgage, about 50% of the rent goes back into the property, whether you're paying real estate tax, homeowners insurance, maintenance, IRS tax on there, and we're talking about 50%. So if I have $2,000 a month coming in, $1,000 goes out the window right from jump. And then from there, if I have a mortgage, then I'm breaking even, at best. So these margins are pretty tight. People think that, hey, if you own property, you're a multimillionaire, owning a property is a long-term. Hey, if I keep a property for 10, 20 years, yes, then I'm in a good position, because now I may own the property free and clear. And, I understand how everything works when it comes to renting. But in the short term, real estate is a long-term gain. It's a long-term asset. And these rent controls, hey, watch out if it, comes to your neck of the woods. You may want to fight that one. But hey, you may 100% agree with it. Pick a side, what you think is good, bad, leave me a comment. Talk to you soon. Once again, happy 4th of July.